and welcome to Let's Be Honest. This is our series of frank and open chats hosted by a midwife like me. I'm Cathy Tabner from my Expert Midwife, and we have a series of frank and open discussions with people like the wonderful Lisa, Lisa Parkins from Teddy Has Two Mums, and indeed he does. Lisa is a journalist and a vlogger. She's a mum to Teddy and baby Sonny, and you can see baby Sonny is with her today. We're thrilled to have her because we're going to talk about the period of time in a woman's life when she births a baby and goes into this, what we're calling the fourth trimester. And this is when our body, particularly the bits of our body that do the work in birthing, go into a time of recovery and resetting, remodeling, looking a little bit different and feeling a little bit different. And we want to talk with Lisa about that today because we know that we're going to lift the lid on something that people find a little bit embarrassing to talk about wrongly. We don't know why, but there is a bit of a stigma associated, and we want to break that and get the discussions going. And we hope that you'll do this as well in your lives with your friends and your family and normalise the discussion of knowing how your bits should feel and look and what goes on in the fourth trimester. And Lisa, you are in that period right in the middle now, maybe a bit further on in the middle with baby Sonny. So thank you for joining us today, Lisa, and welcome.
Thank you, Cathy. I'm really happy to be having this chat with you. Yeah, totally in the thick of the fourth trimester.
Do you want to start us off by just talking about how your bits felt, how you got through that birthing time, what they were like beforehand and what they were like after you birthed?
Well, thank goodness for those donut cushions, because I sat on one of those for a good few weeks because it was quite sore down there. And I know it's probably going to sound really, really funny, but I just wasn't prepared for how it would feel. And I got away pretty lightly in terms of how my labour went. I didn't tear particularly badly. I had an episiotomy, but that seemed to heal, well, I'm told. I mean, I don't know. Every time someone looked at it, they said, healing well. I was like, great, thumbs up. But just, it still took me a while before things started to feel normal again, before I was able to walk normally again, and just sit down on the sofa. And
yeah, really sore, really bruised. So just to clarify before we talk anymore, when we talk about the bits, what do we mean by the bits? We want women to normalise being able to talk about the bits, and we've all got different names. I've heard them all as a midwife. You can call your bits whatever you like, but just to clarify, when we're talking today, we're talking about when you look at yourself. So you're going to see the external genitalia. We talk about the vagina, but you don't see your vagina. Your vagina is an internal tube. So the bits we're going to talk about are the vulva, which starts externally. If you shave your pubic hair, there's a little fat pad at the top called the mons pubis, and that is a protective pad. That is not weight you've gained. That's always there, the little fatty pad at the top. And then you've got these lips. The outer lips, major labia, are covered with hair, and the inner lips are not. Now, sometimes the inner lips are bigger than the outer lips. That is not telling you about the size. Yours might be different. They might be asymmetrical. One might be longer than the other, and they can go from dark black to brown to pink. As I say, external covered with hair, internal mucous membrane secreting and lubricating that part of your body. And then within that vulva, opening up those labia, you're going to see the clitoris at the top, a small, tiny little pea-shaped organ covered with a hood of skin. Just under that is like a little dimple. That's the tube you're going to wee through. That's your urethra. And then you've got the introitus. That's the entrance to the vagina. And as I say, you don't see your vagina. That is on the inside. So the vagina, different size, different shape. Underneath the vagina is a bit of skin called the perineum, really important in birthing, and that is part of your pelvic floor. Skin and muscle forms a bit of a protective base to your pelvic floor, supporting your organs, and beneath the perineum, which does stretch and get damaged in birthing, but beneath the perineum, another part that takes a hit is the anus, the bottom, and that can be something that we'll talk about today as well. So when you think, Lisa, that you birthed your gorgeous baby, of course, all of that area of your body, your bits, would have felt sore and swollen, traumatized. Because of your episiotomy, somebody's directly cutting into the perineum down at the right. If you imagine it like a clock face, round about between 6 and 7 o'clock, somebody cuts down with your consent and at the height of a contraction, usually when your perineum's very, very thin, a small 1 to 2 inch incision in a straight line. In an episiotomy, it's an artificial cut to enlarge the opening of the vagina, and it's done through that perineal stretched skin and muscle and repaired afterwards. Did you do anything to prepare your bits in pregnancy? Or?
Well, I kept thinking that I need to massage that perineum, but he came early and then I ran out of time, and I ran out of time for everything. I was so unprepared for this baby to come. Did some perineum massage, but nowhere near and as much as I should have. And it's really interesting to listen to you talk, because you've literally taught me about like 500 new things about my vagina, which is nuts, given that I'm 40 years old and have recently had a baby, and I still don't, you still just don't entirely understand it, I guess. Strain on the bottom, that's probably where I felt it the most. I remember accidentally, I did not look on purpose, within 24 hours of having Sonny. I was in the hospital toilets, and the mirror was very low, and I just turned around and I happened to get a good look, and I was horrified. Like, my bum did not look like I thought it should. And I'm happy to report doesn't look like that anymore. But yeah, I had real trouble with hemorrhoids, and I had some hemorrhoids before I gave birth, which I didn't tell my midwife about for about 3 weeks. Lindsay kept saying to me, "You must talk to your midwife." But yeah, definitely when I was walking, the first few walks that I did after having Sonny, I felt some pressure around the bum. So everything else kind of felt okay, but that was where I felt the most, felt something that didn't feel quite right.
Really sensitive, isn't it? And it's interesting that you say how sort of embarrassed you felt. And, somebody who's got a public persona and is happy to talk on screen, you still felt that sort of stigma, which we surveyed over 1,000 of our women, and we asked them to talk to us about how they felt about the bits. And 66% of them felt a stigma was associated with discussing that part of their anatomy with anybody. And 44% of them said when they looked at their anatomy like you did, they looked down and they thought, my God, I am never going to look or feel the same again. It was a big, big shock for them. So it's terrible that you get this shock, and yet you feel this, oh, I don't want to mention it to anybody, because we really want to get across to you today that, we want you to talk to us. You've got that damage that 90% of women are going to get. 90% having a first baby are going to get damage on that perineum. And we want to know that that's going to heal well for you. And we need you to know that your healing is important in this 14 weeks to look after yourself, to 12 to 14 weeks after your birth, because healing is a 4-stage process. So healing starts as soon as you've birthed your baby and somebody says, right, you need those stitches. They're going to stop the bleeding, and they're going to bring those edges together, and they're going to put dissolvable stitches in, which will slowly dissolve over about 90 days. So that's the first stage of healing, to stop the bleeding. Internally, then, you're going to get some sort of scabbing over and clot formation inside. And then you're going to get, that's the second stage, and then you're going to get a rebuilding stage. And the rebuilding stage of healing is when your body remodels that tissue, a mesh forms, it builds new tissue. That's very often where you're itchy, sensitive and sore, but some of it's a bit unpleasant, but just be reassured, when you are feeling itchy and prickly and tingly, that is a sign of healing in that area of the body. So it's unpleasant, but it probably means everything is going okay. The final stage is maturation and strengthening, and your body's healed. The skin heals very, very quickly within about 4 days, but it takes a good full month for it to be properly healed. If you birth vaginally, it can take a little bit longer if you've got a bigger cut. Now, if you have a C-section, it can take 1 to 2 years for all the internal healing from every single layer that has been cut. So healing is a massive part of this part of your life.
Well, let me tell you, Cathy, anytime somebody said, do you want me to have a look? I said, yes.
Good.
And I want to have a look down there. And I spritzed my bits too many times. I've lost count. I love that stuff. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
So nice and cooling. And to talk about, spend how much time you spend on the loo. again, with the issue with hemorrhoids and piles, that was the scariest thing for me, was going to the toilet, because it just, in the early days, I just thought I'm going to do more damage, like the world is about to fall out, and it just didn't feel like it normally does.
And you're used to expecting your vagina to feel different, but you're not used to expecting your bottom, even though they are side by side, closely connected. And some of the tears that you get when you birth your baby actually encroach on your bottom hole. So we grade your tears, grade 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the grade 3 and 4 tears are actually encroaching on that rectal mucosa, that muscle, that ring. So it's really important that we acknowledge that the bottom gets just as sore as the vagina after birth. And really, because of the hormones, the constipation that most pregnant women feel, it's a tough ask to just get yourself right from hemorrhoids. You might find that you need to give yourself some time to heal, but possibly go along and see your GP. Okay.
But it does make sense that lots of women have trouble with hemorrhoids and piles when you consider how you give birth. And of course, until you actually have a baby, it is really quite difficult to understand just exactly what the body needs to do to push. Yeah. I've been to antenatal classes and I heard, people talk about it, and it's like going to the toilet, but you really, until you have pushed that baby out, it's difficult to know, like, just the amount of pressure and just the strain and the amount of hard work to actually deliver a baby. So it isn't any wonder that we get a few piles, I suppose, afterwards.
Yeah, and you are pushing using exactly the same muscles as if you're really, really badly constipated. So the clue is there. It is the same abdominal straining and pushing that you're doing, and it's that pelvic floor, that same part of the body is going to take that hit of that massive strain. If you're somebody who's pushed, remember, if you're having a first baby, they will give you up to 3 hours to push that baby out if you're in a good condition and your baby's in a good condition. That, you'll probably never spend that long straining, in a year's worth of poos as what you do in just pushing that one baby out on that one day. So you do get a mighty, mighty effect from birthing your baby vaginally, and the hemorrhoids, they just don't get talked about enough. They're very, 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 very common. It's unusual not to get them. If you've escaped hemorrhoids after a full-term pregnancy and a vaginal birth where you've pushed your baby out, you've done really, really well, and you've dodged a massive inconvenience. And women do not talk about it. You've got to tease it out of them as a midwife. You've got to say, how are you? And they say, I'm fine. And then you've got to say, so, and you've to go through the parts of the body that take the hit. So another one is weeing. Are you going for a wee? Okay. Did you find your bladder felt a bit knocked off then after you pushed Sonny out?
I do remember the first wee being just felt like the greatest wee I'd ever done. Feeling euphoric that I'd been. And I don't know whether that's just because it was like one of the things that I needed to tick off, before I could be discharged, and just to go back a little bit about you talking about the exercise, and it's really interesting what you say. And I had no idea actually that the walking that we were doing was helping my recovery in that way, because actually it was just helping me not to go insane, right? To get out of the house. And so it's interesting that it has lots of benefits. I started just trying to just go around the block once or twice fairly early on. And like you say, I am married to a personal trainer, one who is qualified in pre and postnatal fitness and who works specifically with women through pregnancy and afterwards. So I'm very fortunate in that. And so I was getting advice from her, but actually just for my own mental health, just to leave the house and get some fresh air felt like such a huge achievement. And then it just helped me in so many ways. And also now I learn I was helping with my hemorrhoids.
You were, yeah. And all, things like vitamin D and your circadian rhythm, that when the daylight goes in through your eye, your body knows it's daytime. And that helps. You don't think you'll need help with your rhythms when you've got a baby, but it really does help to get some daylight in your eyes. And every foot strike, as your foot strikes the pavement, that is doing your bone density good. And of course, it's doing your bowels good. And yeah, and I think it's really good for your mental health. If you're somebody who likes walking, we do recommend that. We talk a lot about the spritz and going in that loo and looking after your bits, but getting out of the house is looking after, you know, the bits in between your ears as well, your mental health and your mood. Just the way you feel about life can change in the period of a 20-minute walk. Hearing the birds sing, I've seen you on Instagram strolling out with that buggy and chatting away. It just changes you, and it can be great as a self-care technique to tell your partners and your loved ones, when I've had this baby, I'm going to want somebody to give me half an hour or an hour a day when I can just go out.
In that first few times I went out, I thought, oh my goodness, so slow, just everything.
Well, you're a demon, you walk so fast, I've seen you. But 1 mile an hour, that's half the usual walking pace. You halve your blood sugar for the next 2 hours. So 15-minute walk benefits you for the next 2 hours, and it doesn't have to even be a fast one. I'm sure it'll start to happen, but just concentrate on getting yourself feeling physically better from things like bleeding, stitches, hemorrhoids, and soreness. And just being able to go for a daily walk is a really good way to start. We don't want anybody thinking about treadmills and pounding and doing too much too soon in the 4th trimester.
All I've done so far is stretching, breathing, and some light bodyweight exercises, and that I've only done in the last week and a half, and he's 8 weeks old. So I've taken it really, really slowly. Walking has been a complete savior for me, just to get out and feel like I'm doing something. I've really enjoyed it, but that's about as energetic as it's got, for sure.
Well, that's brilliant, Lisa. I mean, what would you say your blood loss was like? How many weeks would you say it was too heavy for you sort of to forget about it, and when did it go to that, oh yeah, it's on the wane now?
It's funny because it like I say before, it is all a bit of a blur, but I think probably around 5 weeks I felt like we're pretty much done, and then now I'm 8 weeks, and now distant memory, but yeah, it was intense for a while. I felt like all I was doing was changing pads.
Yeah. So 8 weeks out, you're not wearing pads now, you've stopped bleeding. Yeah. And how do your bits feel now? Do they feel to have changed from those first early days? Were they, have you had a little look, swelling wise, stitches wise? How do you feel you're healed now at the 8-week mark?
Well, I have only looked a couple of times because I've give myself a fright. So I do need to be brave. I do need to woman up a bit and have another good look. But I definitely feel like I'm pretty much healed again. I don't feel particularly uncomfortable. My scar, I've been doing some light massage. So I felt that it's much longer than I expected. When I started feeling it, I was like, oh my goodness, this is quite long. I don't know if that's normal or not.
Yeah, but, it is.
It took me a little bit by surprise. So yeah, I definitely feel as normal as I have. That makes sense, of course, because I'm sure with time it will just feel even better. It probably, the best way to describe it is it just all feels a little bit looser than it did before.
Normal, completely normal.
And that's about as bad as it is at the moment. I feel I did a little bit of exercise, like I mentioned, and I've just in the last couple of days the scarf felt a little bit tight, and that's a new sensation. I hadn't really felt it recently at all. And I sat down the other day and I thought, oh, I felt something there. So I'm just going to keep an eye on that.
Was it like almost like a prickly, I'm sitting on a bit of barbed wire feeling? Yeah. So that sounds to me like you're still in that healing stage, remodeling, putting that matrix in, and those nerves coming back, because they've cut nerves when they've done an episiotomy. And you're right, when they do that cut, you feel it, and it's like if you feel a little spot, it feels massive, doesn't it? You look in the mirror and it's not that big. I think if you look in the mirror, you might think it feels bigger than it looks. So that's when it can be helpful to have a look, because you really do sensitively feel along that scar. And massage is really good for scar recovery. So a C-section scar or a perineal scar will both improve with massage. It's really good to do scar massage right along a C-section scar as well. You know, you can get massage sticks, you can get oils, use spare oils from your pregnancy if you want, and do regular feeling that area and making sure that you know that you're feeling better and better and better. I do think probably have a little look, Lisa. I think it won't be as big and long as you're imagining. But, you know, when you're losing that blood as well, you're going for a wee, it's all mixed in. The blood, I think you said about 5 weeks, you felt your bleeding was coming to an end. And that's about right. Most women say between 2 and 4 weeks, they're bleeding on a daily basis. And then it goes to, I can manage a panty liner from here on out. We don't recommend the blood loss. It's not a period. I don't want you to think of it as a period. When you birth your baby, the blood you lose is called lochia, Lochia, and it's a loss from the pregnancy residue. It's not menstrual lining blood that you get with your period. It's a different loss. It can look different from a period. And if you've not had a period for 9 months, it can be pretty scary seeing how heavy it is. So you should never be really changing your pad every hour, unless you're somebody who, when you have a period, you bleed like that. That I would say changing your pad, a full soaked pad, so you don't see any white on that pad at all, is too much probably without having a midwife check you over. So by the time you've gone home from hospital, it should have eased a little bit, and the midwives should ask you about the blood loss. You might lose a couple of clots. It's common to lose a couple of clots, size of a £2 coin or whatever. You can always photograph a clot if you're not sure whether it was normal. Was it just blood that had congealed, or did it have a little bit of the membrane from the baby's bag of waters in it? Sometimes people pass a little bit of clot with a little bit of ragged membrane. So have a look at your maternity pads and buy the big, thick maternity pads, change them regularly and have a look at what's on them. But what you experienced was fairly standard average between 2 and 5 weeks. If it gets heavier on a day, say you have a day when suddenly you become more active, it can get heavier. That can mean you've done too much. So if you're somebody who's been changing your pad and had a certain amount of blood loss, you get up one day and you've been shopping or you've been hoovering or something like that, or just been on your feet for too long, you'll find that loss coming a little bit heavier again. You need to rest. The 4th trimester, it's not just recovery, it's rest as well. Rest precedes recovery. Your body cannot recover if you're not going to allow it. So you do need to get off your feet and rest. If you notice that your blood loss becomes heavier after a period of activity, and you can always check with your midwife if you think it's too long, too strong and too long for you to be getting into the loo and thinking, my God, look at all this. If that's too much for you, check it out with your midwife. If you can't get hold of your midwife, remember you can ring a labour ward night and day. So save those numbers and speak to a midwife if you're having heavy blood loss. It should not be painful blood loss. You might get an after pain, what's called an after pain. If you breastfeed, you do get gushes of blood accompanied by a little cramping feeling, but that is the body going back, the uterus shrinking back down. If you get in pain all the time with blood loss, it can be a sign of an infection. You shouldn't be getting feverish. Your teeth shouldn't be chattering. You shouldn't be feeling like you're getting the flu. And if you've got that heavy blood loss and it's smelling dodgy, like a bit of food that's gone off in the fridge, that's wrong. Your body should just smell like your body. And that blood should not be an offensive blood loss. So always get it checked out.
It's interesting what you say. You know, you really do need to trust your own instincts, right? A bit, you know your body best, but also being brave and enough to ask questions and not feeling, you know, squeamish or self-conscious about it. It's a really fine balance. And just to go back where we were talking about, you know, about having a look and my recovery personally, I had a lot of swelling after birth. Lindsay describes my labia as being angry. It was quite a lot of swelling, and every time a new midwife came in and they had a look, they called a doctor in. Like a lot of people looked at my vagina in the first 12 hours after I gave birth. And Lindsay asked me if I wanted her to take a picture, and I was like, absolutely not. I do not want to see. Now, of course, I really want to know what it looked like, because the way she describes it is not pretty. But, you know, I have no concept of kind of what it looked like after I gave birth, and I wish I did.
Lisa, if somebody who is as a good a communicator as you can sort of suffer in silence like you did, I mean, do you think lots of women are saying nothing about this sort of thing? You know, you're quite an open person, but why do you think women are not saying it? And what can we do as a society to normalise this stigma that we're feeling?
I'm lucky. I've got some really, really good girl pals who have no filter. So there was a lot of stuff that I was able to discuss with them. But yeah, like speaking to someone you don't know, even a medical professional, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's, you know, hopefully there aren't many people like me who are just a bit awkward about talking about private stuff like that. In fact, when I mentioned, you know, that I was kind of come and speak to you today, some people I told were surprised because they know that I'm kind of a little bit like weird about talking about stuff like this. So this has been quite it's been such an interesting conversation. I mean, where were you in my life, Cathy, 8 weeks ago? But also, you know, quite liberating to be able to talk about this stuff.
It is.
And hopefully, you know, it will empower other women. And also, if there are people watching this who are about to give birth, you know, so that they have some kind of idea of things that might happen. And it does sound a bit rubbish, and it does sound like not that much fun, but it is just kind of a byproduct of the most amazing experience of your life. And yeah, don't be, I guess the message is don't be awkward about it, you know, because actually as soon as you say something to someone, you know, as I experienced with my hemorrhoids, as soon as I told the midwife, she magically fixed it for me, or you know, helped me fix it myself, whereas I'd, you know, been quiet about it for weeks before. So really, I don't know why we're so awkward about it. I guess it's just a society thing. We're not really encouraged necessarily to talk openly about stuff like this.
Well, hopefully we're changing that, aren't we? I mean, I think there's so much goes on with women's mood and well-being mentally. Do you think women do, you know, we've talked about the self-care, having a bit of time for yourself every day and just doing something just for you, that helps your recovery so much. Do you think women feel guilty asking their birth partner or their loved ones, when I've had the baby, I'm going to need a bit of time to myself every day? Is that something you feel that you could do? And do you think other women feel guilty for asking about it?
I think probably lots of women do. I'm lucky. I have had a baby with somebody who has already had a baby, so I'm super fortunate that she understands. But, you know, life gets in the way, and sometimes it's not even about feeling guilty, it's about just physically there not being a way around it. You know, I'm on my list of things to do when I wake up quite often is eat. Like, it's actually on my list of things to do, because if I don't put it on there, sometimes I don't eat. So if I'm not finding time to have lunch, then finding time for actual proper self-care is tricky. Although I will admit, I have been for a pedicure this week. So, you know, it's not all bad.
That's lovely. That's
I've
great.
skipped lunch a couple of times, but I have had a pedicure. So, you know, swings and roundabouts. But yeah, it's hard. It's really hard. And if you've got more than one, then it's even harder. You know, when you've got a toddler running around, that's probably been the hardest thing for me about the last 8 weeks, is just balancing the two and not feeling guilty for focusing on one over the other.
But you need a break from your baby every now and then, and a daily period of time. Go commando, no knickers on, get some fresh air into that area, lay on the bed, have a soak in the bath, read a book, go sit in the park, have a pedicure, factor in something. And we've got to stop women thinking that is being selfish, that is being self-caring. And who do you put that oxygen mask on first if you're in that plane? You've got to look after yourself before you can look after anybody else. It is absolutely vital to practice this healing time of self-care in a daily pattern that you do schedule and put it in your plan that you need to do it. And I just think it's been absolutely fantastic to hear from you. You're such a good communicator. You're so out there with it all. And there's not a lot of women that, you know, don't struggle with the things that you've talked about. So I think we've lifted the lid on a little bit of things there. And yeah, is there anything else, any other advice that you would want to give to women in this 4th trimester that you think is a good tip to do in the first few months after your birth?
Yeah, just take one day at a time, and don't beat yourself up. And you know what? If the jobs don't get done, the jobs don't get done.
Perfect.
I spent a lot of time indoors until I realized that even when I stayed in, the job still didn't get done. So I started going out more.
Yeah, good plan.
The washing will get done eventually. So I'm going out for coffee.
I want to just thank you, Lisa. It's been so good of you to take time out at this stage in your life. Is this your self-care a little bit when you've just chatted to us, or are you going to get a bit of time to yourself today?
No, I feel like it's been like therapy, Cathy. Thank you. I've really enjoyed the chat.
I've really enjoyed talking to you today. You're such a good communicator, and I hope that we've lifted the lid on things for any woman watching today, because we don't want anybody struggling at home, feeling isolated, feeling weird or abnormal. We want those bits to get looked at and normalize that feeling and that sensation that you go through when your bits have got to heal when you've birthed. So we want to get that stigma out of the way and get women talking more about this really important part in their lives. And we've got loads more information for women on our website. We've got a fantastic information hub called Know Your Bits on the My Expert Midwife website with videos, guides and blogs, lots of information for you. And we just recommend that you talk to your friends and your family, you get to know your bits, and you take care of yourself, because it's an important part of life for all women, isn't it?
And when someone asks if you want them to check your perineum, say yes.
Yeah. Get your bits checked. Yeah, it's really important. They've done a good job for you, and you can pay them back by making sure you've got an expert looking at them, because don't let that midwife just take your word for it. Get her to check and get your reassurance that you know that healing process is taking place. So we'll wrap it up there, Lisa. Thank you so much, and lots of love to gorgeous baby Sonny. He is absolutely adorable. Makes it all worthwhile, I'm sure.
It does. Thank you, Cathy.
Thank you. Bye, Lisa.